Redvers' tone was light-hearted, but he was an observant man, and I knew he was taking everything in. I also knew we were both wondering where my father had gone. Everything was in its proper place, but I noticed there was a fine layer of dust covering everything, which meant that not only had Father been gone for a bit, but our housekeeper, Mrs. George, hadn't been by in some time either. But I was curious about something else as well, and I cocked my head at him. "Who do you most resemble?" I'd never seen a photograph of the man's family, which suddenly struck me as strange since I was going to marry into it. My fiancé gave a casual shrug, now studying me with a fond smile instead of the portrait. "I'm told I look more like my father, but who's to say?" "Me, I suppose, once I meet him. Although I didn't know when that would be. We hadn't discussed traveling to Redvers' hometown to meet his father. I did know that his immediate family was now just his father, since both his mother and brother had passed away years before, so it would be a small reunion when it did happen. "Plenty of time for that," Redvers said, pulling me into a warm embrace. We broke apart a few moments later, and I continued my tour, showing Redvers through the dining room, popping our heads into the kitchen before ending in my favorite room of the house, the library, which also served as Father's office. It was lined with books of all shapes and genres, where literature and history sat beside current novels and ancient texts. It was a hodgepodge, and I loved it. I took a seat in the wooden chair behind his well-worn wooden desk. It was strewn with papers, which was nothing new, but the stacks of unopened mail were. I flicked mindlessly through the envelopes, puzzling over where my father could have disappeared to and why Mrs. George hadn't been here in what was at least a week, judging by the dust. As I flicked through the envelopes, it suddenly struck me that several of them were from our bank. I frowned, glancing up at Redvers, who was wordlessly perusing the bookshelves. I dug around and found Father's letter opener and slit an envelope open, pulling the paper out and briefly glancing at it. The words repayment and repossess jumped out at me, and I slowed down to read the notice in full. Alarm bells sounded, and I opened another envelope and then another. "Is everything all right?" Redvers asked. I looked up, worry evident on my face. "These are all notices from the bank." I gestured to the array of now-opened envelopes before me. "It seems as though Father took out a large sum of money against the house, and the bank is calling for their note to be repaid." A frown furrowed Redvers' brow. "What would he have wanted the money for?" "I haven't the faintest idea, but it looks as though we only have a few short weeks to return it before they will repossess this row house." I felt panic rise, but tamped it down. Surely there was an explanation, and surely we would find my father later today and have him return the money and all would be well. Once that was settled, Redvers and I could carry on with our relaxing time here in Boston. "Why would he ignore the notices?" I shook my head. "He hasn't opened a single one of them, and some of them have been here for some time. He's a bit absent-minded. I've taken care of the accounts for years. I usually took care of the mail also, and, well, everything. Father taught his classes at the university and usually lost himself in his research. I'd been a little nervous about leaving him behind while I traveled with his sister, but Mrs. George had assured me that everything would be fine. But Redvers was asking an important question. What did he need all that money for? It was enough money that we were now apparently in danger of losing our home. How long ago had he taken it out? And where was it now? Chapter 2. A quick sweep of the rest of the house didn't reveal much, except that my father's battered old trunk was gone. Where to was anyone's guess, although I thought it was worth a trip to see Mrs. George to find out what she might know about my father's whereabouts. If his trunk was missing, it meant that he was farther away than a day trip. This business with the bank wasn't going to be resolved as quickly as I'd first hoped. And the bank was our first stop, so we set off for a walk. It was only a few blocks, and after the train ride, I was happy for a chance to stretch my legs, even if the weather was quite brisk. Late November wasn't the most pleasant time in New England, but it wasn't as though the weather was much fairer back in regular old England either. And with my leather